So, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Bianca Martinez-Penn. I'm with the communications team here at the Chesapeake Bay program, and we're excited to have you join us today for our final webinar in our Beyond 2025 series, where we'll be taking a look at engaged communities, which is the last proposed goal of the Watershed Agreement. So if you want to go ahead to the next slide, Jake. So just so everybody knows, for this webinar, you will be muted as participants for the duration of the webinar. We still do encourage all of you to ask questions whenever you have them. We do have a Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen where you can type in any questions at any point. We will be sure to get to your questions. We are hoping to get to all of them throughout the webinar today, whether that be at the end of each presentation or at the very end. But if we are not able to get to your question during the webinar, if we run out of time, we will be sure to get to you via email. So don't worry, we will get your questions answered. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded. It'll be posted to our YouTube page within 48 hours. And then as registrants, you will also all get an email from me with the recording of the webinar as well as these slides today. So without further ado, we can go ahead and introduce all of the speakers. Thank you so much to all of our speakers today for joining us. First up, I'm going to introduce Les Knapp. Les has previously held a role as policy counsel and now serves the senior policy advisor for county and municipal government issues. In this role, he advises MDE leadership on issues affecting local government, improves MDE's communication and relationship with local governments, and serves as a point of contact for local governments that have issues or questions for MDE. Next, we have Daniel Koval. Daniel joined the Chesapeake Research Consortium in 2024 as staff to the Chesapeake Bay program's Fostering Chesapeake Stewardship Goal Implementation team. Daniel graduated in 2024 from the University of Rochester with a bachelor's degree in environmental studies and public health and a minor in environmental humanities. Next, we have Julie Lawson. Julie currently serves with the District Department of Energy and Environment as the liaison with the University of the District of Columbia and with DC Public Schools, identifying educational and work opportunities for youth and young adults that will sustain their futures as well as the future needs of the district's sustainability workforce. Next, we have Shannon Sprague. Shannon manages environmental literacy and community partnerships for the NOAA Chesapeake Bay office. Since 2003, Shannon has helped build and strengthen the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Education and Training, or BWET, program, and worked with the Education Work Group to advance environmental literacy through cross-jurisdictional coordination. Shannon has also been actively engaged in building community partnerships to support restoration, including standing up both Envision the Chop Tank and Virginia's Middle Peninsula Habitat Focus Area. And last but certainly not least, we have Elise Trelligan. Elise is an accomplished leader in environmental literacy with a proven track record of driving impact at both community and regional and national levels. With expertise in partnership development, community engagement, and strategic program implementation, she currently coordinates NOAA's Chesapeake BWET program, a regional grant initiative supporting equitable systemic environmental education across school districts in the Mid-Atlantic. Elise holds a master's degree from Virginia Tech's Center for Leadership in Global Sustainability and was the 2020 Equity and Justice Fellow with the National Wildlife Federation. So thank you so much again to all of our speakers. And without further ado, we can go ahead into the first presentation with Les.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Les Knapp, and I have had a slight change in role. So I am now the Assistant Director for the Water and Science Administration within the Maryland Department of the Environment, but I still do all of the duties Bianca previously mentioned. And I'm here today to talk about and provide an update on the local leadership outcome. So next slide, please. So the local leadership outcome was introduced in the 2014 agreement with the language you see on screen. Next slide. And when revising that outcome language, we had a strong foundation to build on initially. First and foremost is our knowledge and capacity building efforts. Since 2019, the work groups directly engaged with more than 2,800 local officials through training opportunities, peer learning tours, conference panels, and roundtable discussions. We've also created tailored resources for local governments. A good example of that is the Protect Local Waterways website, launched in 2023. And this site serves as a practical guide to local officials to better understand watershed issues and how they connect to broader priorities like economic development, public health, or public safety. We also continue to listen and adapt. And with goal implementation team funding, we're conducting a technical assistance inventory and gap analysis across the watershed. And this will help identify what support already exists for local governments and where we need to bolster our efforts. Next slide, please. So with that, how do we make our outcome smarter? That is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, while still holding on to its core purpose of increasing the knowledge and capacity of local leaders. And so we began by gathering feedback from across the partnership. We heard from work group members during quarterly meetings, online submissions, and informal coffee chats. We've worked with our jurisdiction representatives to bring management board voices into the process. We've collaborated closely with the local government advisory committee to capture their perspectives. And we've also met with other work groups who have identified local governments in their work plans and strategies. And we also stayed tuned in as other outcome leads shared their own revisions, listening carefully for any insights that we could apply to ours. And with all that, the work group leadership team pulled all of this input together, and one message that came through loud and clear: local governments are essential to the success of Chesapeake Bay restoration. And we also heard some other key points that were consistently made and that helped shape the revised language. The language needed to acknowledge the critical role local governments play, respect local government decision-making authority, position the work group to fully support the partnership in reaching and educating local governments, and explicitly referencing the Chesapeake Bay to keep that connection front and center. Next slide, please. So with that information, we drafted this revised outcome language and target. Next slide. So when it came to the final outcome language, we believe it strikes the right balance. It maintains the core purpose, again, increasing the knowledge and capacity of local leaders. But we also intentionally included the word empower as a way to recognize and respect local decision-making. This isn't about prescribing actions. It's about giving local governments the tools and information they need to lead. And by building that knowledge and capacity, the goal is for local governments to take informed action, driven by their own priorities, but still aligned with the broader Bay restoration goals. And finally, we made sure to include a direct reference to the Chesapeake Bay watershed, keeping the focus clear and rooted in the broader restoration effort. Next slide, please. So local actions are essential to improving the health of the watershed, and we believe this new target truly reflects the aspirations of the full Chesapeake Bay partnership. It also reinforces a core principle of the Watershed Agreement, which is to acknowledge support and embrace local governments and other local entities in watershed restoration, conservation, and protection. And we want to take a moment here also to recognize the strong work that's happening at the state level. The states are already actively engaging in educating their local governments, and the work group aims to complement these efforts. When it comes to tracking progress, we're not starting from scratch either. We already have a process in place. It's called the Local Leadership Survey. This is a biennial survey that we started in 2022 and then conducted a second time in 2024. And this serves to measure the capacity and knowledge among local officials. And it gives us a clear baseline to work from. And with this established process, we see this as a way to measure our performance, but avoid adding new reporting burdens on local governments. I think in all of our jurisdictions, local governments are already stretched, and we're committed to keeping this effort supportive and not burdensome. We also see the survey itself as a potential knowledge building tool. As local elected and appointed officials complete it, they will engage with their staff to gather information, and that can spark new conversations about local actions and projects. And ultimately, our goal here is to serve as a trusted messenger, helping local leaders across the watershed access the tools, the information, and the resources they need to make the best decisions for their communities. Because when we protect our local waterways, we protect the bay. Be happy to answer any questions in the Q&A session, and thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Les. Currently, we don't have any questions in the box, but as a reminder, we do have that Q&A box open at the bottom for anybody that has any questions. Oh, it looks like one just popped in. This one says, I know that the Bay program is also working through its governance structure. Do you know how this goal will affect the governance and structure of the Bay program?
Hey Bianca, this is Rachel. I can actually jump in for a second. So the governance and structure of the Bay program is actually going to be another part of what we're looking at, and we're just beginning that now. So we're just not sure yet of what that'll look like. So right now we're focusing on just the revised outcomes at this time.
Thanks, Rachel. All right, well, if there are no more questions at this time, we can go ahead and move on to our next presentation with Daniel.
All right, hi everybody. To start out the public access outcome, you can go to the next slide. I can share the previous outcome language, which ultimately focused on adding 300 new public access sites in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, with an emphasis on opportunities for boating, swimming, and fishing where feasible. So you can go to the next slide. And so when figuring how to update this outcome, we first just wanted to recognize the huge accomplishment that we did achieve the 2025 target of adding 300 access sites. In fact, we actually surpassed that and have 312 total. So this is a big accomplishment for the work group and all the people who took part in achieving this. We want to recognize that and celebrate these wins where we can. But we do know that the work doesn't stop there. So when figuring out how to update this outcome moving forward, we took into a lot of different factors of things that were presented to us. For starters, there was a lot of cross-partnership interest in expanding the focus of the outcome. So currently and in the past, the work group has only focused on tracking water-based access sites, but there's been a lot of interest in expanding that to track land-based access sites as well, because there is a large amount of the population living in the watershed that do not really necessarily live close to water. So we want to recognize that and expand that with the outcome focus moving forward. Additionally, a lot of the state members brought up some challenges that they see that will impact the land acquisition to get access sites, as well as funding and capacity. So we had to take that into account when figuring out the next numeric target and understanding that we might need to lower the numeric target, but when doing so, adding a new focus that can focus on the maintenance and the quality of the currently existing sites that we've already have in our database. So this kind of focuses on different maintenance structures, the land, grounds, and existing sites, as well as adding compliance features for ADA and ABA accessibility. So all of those discussions have turned into the new draft language. You can go to the next slide. And there's a lot going on this slide, but I will walk you through everything. So for starters, the top little section shows the more broad outcome language, which is to enhance new and existing public access sites through a combination of actions aimed at improving recreational opportunities and accessibility, while also addressing barriers to access. And this is going to be done by increasing the number, which is done in the previous agreements language, but also with the increase in the quality and the geographic distribution of those sites. So for new access sites, which is these next four things are the four targets underneath the broader outcome language. For starters, we have new access sites, which is just a revamp of the previous outcome language. But instead of a 300 target goal, we have lowered that goal to 100 new public access sites. And this is because there's a lot of worry of state funding and state capacity to continue getting new access sites and land for that. But because of that decrease in the numeric sites, we do want to focus more on the quality of those sites. And so these next two targets kind of speak to that. The first one, improving ADA and ABA accessibility features. So our numeric target there is improved 3%, which is about 10 sites in the watershed, by adding those compliance features and making sure that they're all up to date with ADA and ABA accessibility. And then the third one is also speaking to the quality, just access upgrades and maintenance, and maybe some expansion of what recreational amenities are offered at different sites. So our numeric target here is by 2040 to improve at least 100 existing public water access sites. So those are the ones that are currently in our database, the 300 new ones and the ones that existed before that. So that can include new signs, new parking, new public supporting new public facilities, as well as adding different recreation amenities. Maybe one site already has a fishing pier, but we want to add a trail or a wildlife viewpoint. The last one is the biggest expansion to this outcome, and it is expanding access to urban and community green spaces. And this is a big haul, so the specific target has not yet been developed, but the work group is in a lot of discussions with themselves and with experts in the field to figure out what the best specific metric we can use to track this. And so right now it reads as by 2040, expand access to blank % of urban lands and community green spaces identified in the protected lands data set. And that data set from the protected lands group, we are still waiting, which is why there's kind of been a little bit of a time lapse in working on this specific target. But once we get that, we can move forward with the baseline study to figure out where we are in terms of what lands are currently accessible and how we can best track the future methods for that. And moving forward, this will definitely go into the rest of 2025 and into 2026 as well. So that's where the work group is currently, and I can take any questions anybody has.
Thanks, Daniel. And as a reminder, you can use that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions. We have one in the chat, not a question, just a comment, which is a great idea to include protected urban lands access. So kudos to you all. We'll wait just a couple more seconds to see if anybody else has any questions, and then we can move on. All right, it looks like nothing else in the chat right now, so we can go ahead and move on to the next presentation.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Julie Lawson here with DC Department of Energy and Environment. I have the pleasure now of also serving as the co-chair of the Fostering Chesapeake Stewardship Goal Implementation Team. And I've been on the Stewardship Work Group Steering Committee for a number of years and been very involved in the development of really our foundational data set and web tool, ChesapeakeBehaviorChange.org. So if we can go to the next slide, we can talk about what the outcome language looked like in 2014, which was to increase the number and diversity of trained and mobilized volunteers who have the knowledge and skills needed to enhance the health of their local watersheds. And then if we can go to the next slide, we can talk about why we needed to update this. So first, we want to make sure that we're moving in a direction toward smart outcomes, smart targets, meaning specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. We also understand that leaning on the act of volunteering time sets up a lot of equity issues among our Chesapeake Bay residents, that not everyone has the free time, the luxury, the ability to dedicate hours to events to support the restoration of the bay and the watershed. And then also we know that that everybody really takes action towards stewardship in their day-to-day lives, and we want to make sure that that's captured, as well as community scale. What are we doing to move an entire community toward more stewardship actions? Finally, we wanted to lean in on the network of networks concept. It's not realistic for the Bay program itself, this large partnership bureaucracy, to directly reach all 18 million residents in the watershed, but we have hundreds of qualified and talented organizations, community leaders, et cetera, across the watershed that are reaching those individuals. And so really wanting to move the language to be closer to where we actually have some control and responsibility. And so if we go to the next slide, we can look at the new language is to increase public participation in stewardship through stewardship actions that contribute positively to the lands, waters, living resources, and communities throughout the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And then in the target, we really focus on an action of equipping practitioners with the tools that they need in order to support residents in carrying out individual and community level stewardship programs. So like we did, I believe we have one more slide. If we go to that one, really helps us move away from that idea of that you're only a steward if you dedicate hours every week to formal events. We want to be more inclusive and include that public participation more broadly. Like public access, we want to move away somewhat from really focusing on the water, because not everybody in our watershed has direct contact to the water, or really understands their environment or their ability to participate in the environment as being connected to water. We still do want to keep it attached to agreement goals and outcomes, but broadening it to community and land and wildlife habitat in addition to water quality. The outcome language is simple and accessible to the public. It's inspirational based on feedback we received from the management board, and it moves us toward SMART factors. So that was a very quick rundown of those. I do want to highlight again the tools that we have at ChesapeakeBehaviorChange.org, that I hope that if you're not already familiar with it, it's a great opportunity to understand data sets that we have on activities that residents take in the watershed toward protecting their environment. I think we learned a lot from the 2017 to 2023 versions of that survey that developed those data sets on how to make it more inclusive to different types of communities, different demographics, different experiences and ways that people live in the watershed. That website also has numerous tools for supporting organizations and practitioners in implementing behavior change campaigns and helping support their constituents with stewardship actions. So I saw a bunch of stuff show up in the Q&A, so, or two at least. So I think we can move to that now.
Thanks so much, Julie. The questions in the Q&A are actually from the previous presentation, so we will hold those to the end, but we will wait a couple seconds to see if anybody has questions for you before we move on to the next.
I'm just wiping down some of the past. But then I seem to keep, my nose seems to stay kind of inflamed. That usually means
Great. Looks like nothing at the moment, but once again, if you have any questions at any time, feel free to drop them in the chat. Oh, looks like someone said that they missed the website that Julie just mentioned. Julie, would you mind just saying that again real quick?
Yeah, I'll say it out loud and we could type it into the Q&A too. It's ChesapeakeBehaviorChange.org.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Well, we can go ahead and move on to the next.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Elise Trelligan. I work for NOAA Chesapeake Bay office, and I'm the coordinator of the education work group. Also, want to acknowledge, I think we have our chair, Shannon Sprigg, on the meeting too. And I'm going to be sharing a quick overview of the changes that you might have noticed in the environmental literacy space. And we have two outcomes under environmental literacy. If we go on to the next slide, I'll start off by describing the process for making these revisions for both of our outcomes. And it was pretty robust, as you can see here on the screen. We started all the way back last summer by conducting a series of listening sessions with the education community, including in partnership with our state networks, to really understand the on-the-ground priorities. And then we followed that up with a broader Get 5 outcome assessment survey and took that information from both the formats, the listening sessions, and the survey results, and then shared that consolidated feedback with some of our core decision-making groups, like our network advisory team, the education work group, and with our state representatives. These leaders then helped us to form up a draft of what our outcomes could look like and helped us to make some important decisions related to the organization of our outcomes and the framing so that we could be really measurable. We were also able to bring in our evaluation consultant into this conversation too for her perspective on measurability, which was really critical. Then in February, after all of our state representatives felt comfortable with where we landed, they conducted outreach to their agency leadership to brief them on the changes before they went up to management board for finalization. And we found this whole process really helpful because we were able to have open and honest conversations with both the broad community and with our state leaders. So with that background, I'm going to dive into each of the outcomes. We can go to the next slide. This is actually just a title slide here, so we can skip this one. And you can see what our 2014 student outcome looks like. It used to be called the student outcome, and I'll read that to you. It's to continually increase students' age-appropriate understanding of the watershed through participation in teacher-supported, meaningful watershed educational experiences and rigorous inquiry-based instruction with a target of at least one MIWI in elementary, middle, and high school. And so you can see here, not particularly smart, not particularly measurable, but aspirational. And then on our next slide, you can see what our new language looks like. So this, again, similar to what you saw before, has an outcome statement and then a specific target. And so our new outcome is called student experiences, and it says to continually increase the number of students who participate in inquiry-based environmental literacy instruction, working towards at least one meaningful watershed educational experience in elementary, middle, and high school. And then our target is where you see that measurability coming through. By 2040, state targets are reached that result in 75% of public school students being enrolled in a school district that offers a MIWI for all students. On our next slide, you'll see some of what has changed here. The updates really emphasize inquiry-based learning, which is broader than just MIWI. And at the same time, it still emphasizes the importance of the MIWI, which is really the cornerstone of environmental education. And so we're looking to measure at least one of those in each school district. We also switched the name from student outcome to student experiences because that was a little confusing for people who are in the education space because student outcomes mean something in the formal ed space. And then finally, it's measurable now. So each state actually has their own sub-targets, which ultimately gets us to that 75% of students. And I'll give you a little preview of what that looks like here on the next slide. You can see how these state-specific targets contribute to the overall 75% student enrollment goal. These here aren't going to be part of the outcome statement, but rather they're part of our internal documentation, and maybe we'll see those show up in like our management strategies, and they'll help us to be accountable over time. So that's that for our student experiences outcome. And then our second outcome on the next slide here is focused on school district planning. Thanks, Jake. And so on this slide, you'll see our previous language from the 2014 agreement. And it used to be called Environmental Literacy Planning Outcome, which asks for each participating Bay jurisdiction to develop a comprehensive and systemic approach to environmental literacy for all students in the region that includes policies, practices, and voluntary metrics that support the environmental literacy goals and outcomes from the agreement. So again, similar to the student outcome, it was a little bit vague generally, but then also it's not measurable or time bound. And on the next slide, you can see our new language. And again, we've got the outcome statement and then our specific target. So it's now called the school district planning outcome, and it asks for us to continually increase the number of school districts that have policies and practices in place that support environmental education and sustainable schools. The target is that by 2040, all jurisdictions reach their target for the number of school districts that are well prepared to deliver a comprehensive and systemic approach to environmental literacy. So next slide will show a little bit about what changed. Oh, I think that slide must be missing. Well, I can tell you what changed. Maybe we can go back. Yeah, thanks so much. So the changes might seem subtle between this one and the last, but they are really important. So specifically, the focus is now on planning at the school district level, and that really acknowledges the local control nature of education. Decisions are made within school districts, and so that's really where we wanted to focus. You'll also notice that sustainable schools shows up in this outcome statement as well. Sustainable schools used to be its own outcome under the environmental literacy goal, and it's now folded into the district planning outcome because it can really be a marker or a pillar of school district planning and change, and we wanted to emphasize that. It's also been renamed from environmental literacy planning to school district planning, which again, it really focuses on where the change happens within districts, but also still acknowledges that we need that state level support to move that work forward. And then again, we have our clear numeric targets that were developed in the same way as the student experiences. and the states actually determined their own targets. And I don't have, it looks like the slide wasn't included here, but in the final slide, you would have been able to see the number of the percentages of school districts per state. And as you can see in this target, we're really referencing those in here, and that's the measurable component. And that was a really hard decision for us to make because we wanted to like have a number that we were aspiring towards. However, our states are so vastly different in how they're composed. Pennsylvania has nearly 500 school districts and Maryland has just 24. So a rolled up number could have had some unintended consequences for us, like disproportionately putting all the work on certain states. And so these differentiated targets provide our states a more comfortable but an ambitious runway to achieve the outcome. And I think that's all I have for our environmental literacy outcomes. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. We do have a couple questions in the chat for you. The first one is one MUI for all students. Does that mean one opportunity per elementary, middle, and high school, or total throughout all 3 levels of school?
Yeah, so the maybe we can scroll back so that folks can see how that outcome is written. So while we do still aspire to have one MIWI in elementary, middle, and high school, and we wanted to keep that in there to recognize some of our states in particular, like Maryland, like Virginia, are already making a lot of progress in that, you know, 1 per grade band. But what we'll be measuring ultimately and looking at as kind of our indicator is that public schools have at least one MIWI across any of those grade bands. So when you look at Chesapeake Progress, which is where we kind of document our progress over time, you'll actually, what we hope to do is to be able to show both of those things, but our outcome and our target will really be focused on that one MIWI.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is, whereas the previous goal in 2014 sounded like we were aiming for all students to have MIWIs, and this new iteration only has 75%, sounds like a decrease. Is the reality that the goal used to be aspirational, but now we can measure it and actually increase the MIWIs being taught?
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of concept here is like we of course want to see 100% of students having meaningful watershed educational experiences, but in order to be realistic, where a lot of our conversations revolved around like what sorts of funding is available to resource this. We're talking a lot in our community about sustainable funding sources, not just grant resources, as well as what are all those additional kind of environmental literacy planning components that help for MIWIs to be sustainable into the long term. So it is still like our aspirational goal to get there, but for 2040, we felt like 75%. And like you can see on the next slide, if we flip one up, you can see what the state targets are actually looking like. Maybe it's 2 more up. Yeah, there we go. So when Maryland, for example, looked at how close they are to reaching 100%, they're actually really close, but it would be difficult for them to say that they could reach 100% by 2040, just knowing how things shift and change so much in school districts. I'm happy to talk more about this, but I think I answered it sufficiently for you now.
Great, thank you so much. Looks like that's everything at the moment, so we can go ahead and move on to the next presentation.
All right, last one for this webinar. So workforce, we're going to take a little bit more time on because this one is effectively new to the agreement. If we want to go to the next slide. So why do we need this? It has been said over and over by the jurisdictions and by our goal teams and our outcomes that a big hurdle to accomplishing our goals and outcomes has been a lack of technical expertise and sufficient staffing. We also know that economic development is important to all of our jurisdictions and that we want more of our residents employed in the green economy, and particularly in roles that can support the restoration and conservation of the watershed. Back in 2022, the program established a workforce action team within the goal implementation team for fostering Chesapeake stewardship in response to this increasing interest in understanding workforce related challenges to achieving the program's goals and outcomes. The action team supported the development and implementation of a landscape analysis, as well as coordination and collaboration around workforce development and programming. That landscape analysis offered a number of recommendations, including better feedback loops between training providers and employers, better coordination between training providers, employers, and the outcomes in the agreement. And then another project of the action team was to do a gap analysis among all of the outcomes on what workforce needs they saw that were keeping them from meeting their targets. So we proposed this outcome as a replacement to the diversity outcome, which we were no longer able to work on under the recent executive orders from the federal administration, as a way to continue the work of supporting all residents of the watershed, ensuring that the work that we do reflects the demographics and reflects the communities within the watershed, and at the same time is meeting the needs of our other goals and outcomes. So we can go to the next slide to show what our language is. So our outcome draft is to increase the ability of all job seekers in the watershed to understand, participate in, and succeed in environmental career pathways. And then we have 3 targets based on each of those 3 actions. We want to improve understanding by informing and growing implementation of strategies to help students, educators, and job seekers to become aware of and understand environmental careers and the pathways to them. We want to increase the number of post-secondary institutions and training providers offering industry-recognized credentials that support agreement goals and outcomes. And we want to see greater hiring and retention of workers trained in fields necessary to support those agreement goals and outcomes. This last one in particular came from feedback from some of our signatory states that see hiring and retention as being big challenges for them, especially as their existing workforce ages and retires, and needing to ensure that not only are we growing job opportunities in this field, but that we are continuing to fill seats as our current workforce ages out. So we've been really pleased to have support from all of the signatories and a lot of enthusiasm as we build our work on this. Because it is effectively new, we don't have baseline data yet to allow us to establish numeric targets at this time. But once we are able to get started on a management strategy in 2026, I think we'll be really diving in on that landscape analysis and the recommendations in that, as well as revising the gap analysis that was done a few years ago. And we're also excited to be bringing in new agencies from our signatory jurisdictions. We have departments of labor, we have workforce boards, we have counties and local governments getting involved. I want to highlight that this outcome will really work very closely with the stewardship, local leadership, and education outcomes within this goal team as pathways and for understanding all of the work that needs to happen and how we bring people in, all the ways that we can bring them in and then work them into employment, in addition to working across all of the outcomes and the other goals that need to train, hire, and retain staff in order to meet their targets. So I can pause there for any questions that anybody has. And I appreciate, again, all of the enthusiasm that people have had for this. If you're interested in getting involved, we're very excited to have a lot of energy.
Thanks so much, Julie. We do have a couple questions that came in for you. The first one is, why will it take 10 years to achieve the workforce goals?
Fair. I think, as they're written right now, it is very directional. It's just get us better at it. I think a lot of our original writing on this, everybody was aiming for a 2040. We thought 2040 was too far out, so we brought it back to 2035. Realistically, yes, it's probably we'll be able to get there faster, but because we don't have a solid baseline, we can't really say how long it will take. But I think we'll be able to show at least directional improvement before then.
Next question is, can you talk a little bit about the gap analysis that was done to identify green job / capacity needs?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. To be frank, this was done by an intern, and I believe a C-Stream intern, who just went to each of the goal implementation team chairs and work group chairs and asked for their direct input. I think my hope is that, as we get move, hopefully evolve from action team to work group, and we have some fantastic staff support, and we get a little bit more ongoing support and, frankly, pressure to be successful on this, that we'll be able to take a more formal approach to that gap analysis. It's exciting that we have the states, as I mentioned, are getting involved and they're bringing in their workforce board. So we're going to be able to lean on a lot more subject matter expertise than we've been able to bring into the program in the past.
Next question is, who do you envision making up the work group? Who will inform the work plan for the workforce outcome? And how do you see this work group intersecting with the stewardship work group?
Thanks, Jenny. So I'm currently the chair of the action team / work group. Bart Merrick from NOAA, who had been the chair of the action team, is the vice chair now. And then we're staffed by Meredith Lemke and Daniel Koval, who you just heard from. We have representation so far who've helped us craft this language and get us here and figure out what our next steps are for the next 6 months or so, from particularly Virginia, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Maryland. And then we also have several training providers. I see Beth Ginter is on the line right now, with Chesapeake Landscape Professionals. We have Chesapeake Stormwater Network participating. I mentioned we have representation from some labor boards, and departments of labor. So we're really, at this point, interested in anybody who wants to participate, can participate, has some ideas that they want to bring to it. And we will continue to grow it out. We've applied for the technical assistance opportunity from Local Concepts to help us really intentionally build out our network. And we'll be continuing to build relationships across all of the other work groups to ensure that we are supporting their targets as well.
Okay, thank you. The next question is there any language about increasing the number of environmental jobs there actually are out there and available to the workforce, or funding / development for environmental jobs and defining environmental jobs?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. That's actually mostly my day job is understanding, defining what is a green job. One of the big barriers that we have is that the way that the Federal Department of Labor and a lot of state departments of labor track jobs is through very traditional sectors, and green jobs, particularly ones that relate to the work that we do, cut across a lot of those traditional sectors, and it's much more difficult to enumerate those. So that's something that I think by bringing in some of those workforce experts, we are going to be able to better slice and dice the data, and really hone in on some definitions. We'll also be able to align those occupation definition codes and definitions with the curriculum and other ways that education defines training and career and technical expertise experiences. So that's the intent. This is pretty new, like I said, new to the program, so we've got a lot of work to do, but we're looking forward to learning together and appreciate any suggestions for expertise or resources.
The next question we have is the gap analysis published for review? How can we add to that body of language or body of knowledge?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. It's in our shared folder. I'm not sure if it's if it's published anywhere, but we can definitely put it up on our action team page on ChesapeakeBay.net once we have it, once I find it. And that way it'll be up there. for other folks to look at. And then, yes, once we get started into January, we've been advised to hold off on working on our management strategy until after the executive council meeting. But once we get past that, we'll definitely be going out to the full partnership for support on this new gap analysis.
So our next question is, was a shorter goal for measurement considered, such as the first time base goal is to establish the baselines and set the 2035 targets after?
Yeah, again, I think that comes back to the management strategy pause, that we want to, yes, I mean, we don't know, because there's a lot of things that we don't know, that we want to get into those initial steps of, like, how do we establish the baseline? Because again, going back to that previous question about how do we count the number of jobs, the number of training programs, that'll be, I think those are all intertwined, and unfortunately, not something that we were able to pull together for this purpose. But I appreciate the feedback.
Great, thank you so much, Julie. We are now going to open it up to our general Q&A, because it looks like that was the last one we had for that presentation. Julie, I will say while you're still on screen here, it looks like we had one from the stewardship presentation. This question asks, is this going to entail direct contact with the direct watershed waterway communities?
I'm not sure if I understand the question, unfortunately.
Yeah, Kelly, if you want to expand your question in the chat, we can go ahead and answer that for you. Looks like there's
Actually,
another one.
I was
Oh,
gonna
sorry.
say, Kelly, we can unmute you if you want to come off and talk a little bit more about this 1 second. Or actually, Jake, can you do that, please?
You would like to for me to
Can you
unmute
can you unmute Kelly Hengler, please?
Sure. Okay, Kelly, you should be unmuted.
Hi, yeah, for clarification, I mean, I came in, I'm a policy analyst, by the way. I'm also a physician assistant. And I would really encourage doctors, nurses, everybody in their communities to be part of this watershed agreement revision and review. But at the end of the day, I jumped into this particular webinar following and tracking the good works of the watershed agreement revision. And what I live in a watershed. I live specifically in southeastern, end of the Chesapeake Bay Watershed in Virginia. I live in a waterway community, and we're always propagating the programs, to show up and show out and ask questions. But I apologize. I didn't know I was going to be on audio here. I didn't frame myself properly. At the end of the day, we have not seen the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement in our waterway communities on the lower James. I mean, it's sterile. And so my hope would be that we would actually have an understanding the original, 2014, right? Is get the volunteers, the stewards of the land, of which I am part of as well, from the shoreline to the inland areas on these direct impaired waterways need to be met with. You cannot ask people on their private property what they don't know is available for them to do to improve. As you said, many people are very busy. The greatest volunteerism is the stewardship of your own land. You see what I'm saying? We need to start at the bottom and work our way up to the top, is what I'm going to be putting in my comments. So I jumped onto this webinar hoping that I would hear about actual community engagement because of the shortage of manpower capacity and funding that we need. And I totally support the workforce idea here. But all the way down at the locality level, there just isn't the manpower and the talent and the capacity and the funding to do all of that and everything else that has to be done, for municipalities. It's on the people. And so we need the people activated. We need the community, not just the locality, even asking the localities to try to roll out Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement information is a break point. So we don't get it. The circuit breaker is initiated. I mean, it clicks. So please, in whatever it is that we're trying to do for this revision agreement, even encouraging people to join these workforces for available jobs to increase the capacity, we need to do it directly in the watershed with the landed landowners. I am not excluding anyone here. I'm just saying that landed landowner stewardship is, I don't see it targeted. And that could hit every checkbox you have here of encouraging the children into these workspaces, and jobs and green spaces and so on and so forth. It just hits every checkbox. So there's the bingo card that I'd expect to have today and talking to y'all on audio. But what I'm not hearing from a community-based, health safety-based arena is actually going into communities who are the stewards, and let that be the multiplier effect. So that's pretty broad for what you're doing here. I appreciate your work and thank you for unmuting me. I hope I've landed that in a good way and an added value way today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's actually exactly why we changed the focus of the stewardship outcome from that the program would create all of these volunteers to now the program is going to support those organizations that are in your community, the people you feel comfortable having stand in your front yard and talk to you, that they'll be more effective. They'll have more tools, more data, more resources to help in your community because that's where they live too, as opposed to the bureaucracy that's, you know, based either in Annapolis or in all of the other state capitals, making those decisions that may not resonate on the ground for you. So that's the biggest pivot in that particular outcome, is to work on supporting the work of the local organizations, those trusted messengers that can help you help you build that community spirit. So thank you for raising that and clarifying your question.
Thank you, Julie. So we do have a couple minutes left for general questions. So again, any questions in the chat, you can go ahead and throw them in there. If we run out of time, we will make sure to get to you via email. First one, I believe this one came in for Daniel. How are you defining access to urban lands? Is the active and passive recreation opportunities outlined?
Yeah, so currently the work group has not set on a specific definition yet. These conversations are going to be happening in the next few months. So there's no specific definition for like outlined in the agreement yet for how we're going to track that. But all of that, what you said, like certain amenities, certain recreation things are going to be included. We have to have discussions on what kind of parameters are going to be set on what counts as a access site. Is it going to be a certain amount of acres? Is it going to have one specific recreation site? How many amenities, things like that. So all those conversations are going to be happening in the next few months.
Great. The next question is, Pennsylvania has explored a walkability analysis to try and get more population to be within walking distance to a park. Have you looked into including an analysis on the walkability for the Bay program building off Pennsylvania's work?
Yes, this is something that we have looked into. There's a few different avenues that we can approach into creating the metric for access, and things like walkability, the Pennsylvania's project with that, as well as the 10-minute walk to parks and like a half-mile distance between somebody's community and a park. So those are all things that we are incorporating and thinking about as we continue to finalize the definition for access.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniel. The next question I believe we have is for Les. This one asks, how do we answer local leaders when they ask about funding for goals, monitoring, implementation success, and enforcement?
That's a challenging question. As everyone I think here knows, money really drives a lot of the capacity of local governments. The first issue, of course, is getting local governments to say, why should I care? Why about the Bay? And you know, what can I do about it? And once you get those two questions answered, you get people saying, yes, we want to do something, and here's what we could do. The next question inevitably comes up is how do we pay for it? So we do try to work and identify potential funding sources, both broadly as classes of funding, and also on occasion, when you get a specific project and specific outreach from a particular jurisdiction, we try to go as granular as we can there. There's a whole host of funding options from federal, state, local, nonprofits. We do try to broadly address that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Looks like our next question, we are going back to Julie for another question. This one asks, does workforce development include developing or building entrepreneurial skills? For example, starting businesses. Oh, looks like I lost that one. For example, starting businesses in addition to the job seeking component.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Definitely one of the, in addition to starting up businesses, which I think is a key piece of it, is also growing local businesses. We see, people, I think that's a big outcome we see from training programs, in particular those who get certified in Chesapeake Landscape Professional, and then they go and start their own company, and then they can employ people. So I think this is a great way of getting past barriers to employment for people who may struggle to get jobs in the traditional way, and they can start a business instead, and then grow the economy that way. So that's definitely in the piece of it. I think that's another tough data nugget to crack, but definitely keeping that in mind as well.